All right. Well, welcome everybody. And here we are at the webinar called Got Data? Finding Insights, Driving Business Value, and Telling the Data Story. So I'm very pleased everybody could join us today. I know we've still got a few more people who will be signing on. So we'll just go ahead and start, and they'll catch up as we can. I've got a chat box open. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to share a little back and forth. And so let's start digging into the data, so to speak. Okay, so first of all, who am I? Well, I'm Karen Dietz. I'm a business and data storyteller. I've been in the field of business storytelling for like forever. And I really coach executives on how to have more impact and influence and inspiration, all through the power of storytelling. And I am also the author of the best-selling book, Business Storytelling for Dummies. And I also am a TEDx speaker. And the other thing that I do is I curate content on business storytelling. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been watching this trend called data storytelling. And there are a few things I've noticed about different audiences and the way they're talking about the data story, and different ways that people in my own profession are talking about data storytelling. And it's moved out from being a small trend into a real core business place of inquiry today. So in the past year, I've really been looking at all of this, doing a lot of research and putting together a model and a process for finding and telling the data story. And I've been doing that with my co-author, Lori Silverman. So what we're going to do today is dig into all of that material. So the agenda for our time together is, okay, what is data storytelling? What works and what doesn't? What are the mind shifts you need to make, and everybody needs to make, to really be able to tell the data story well? And then how do you go about finding the data story? And I will share with you one simple story structure to use for telling the data story. There are several. I'll talk about the many that actually exist. I'll name a few and we'll go through one. And then we'll do a little QA at the end and wrap up. And hopefully we'll have time to do that without breaking out of our 30-minute time frame. All right. So let's talk about some mind shifts. And I think the first one to make is to put data and the data story kind of inquiry and need and desire into a larger frame and context. And that larger frame and context is the experience economy. Now, we've been in the experience economy for many years now, and it's continuing to become more and more important because we know today that customers don't buy products and services necessarily. They buy and are looking for the experience that they receive from that. And so getting a lot smarter about delivering experiences is really important. Now, how do you do that? Well, yes, data is really important, and today big data is driving so much of business. And so how do we link data into the experience economy and delivering great experiences for people? Well, there's some other tools that we need to use to do that, creating personas and journey maps. I'm going to talk about those briefly towards the end of the program. And also story, because story is an experience, and we can hook story into data, personas, journey maps, and the whole idea and notion of the experience economy. Because customers have experiences, not just transactions. And customers are real people, not just a code in your CRM. Stories are experiences. It's not a formula, right? And not just a formula, I should say. So it's all about moving data from information into the realm of experience so that data is an experience, not just a chart. I think that's a big mind shift to make. And it's a logical one. If we're talking about storytelling, story is an experience. And if we're linking story and data together, then we need to start thinking about data as an experience. So let's dig into data a little bit. Now, this research and this chart is about from 2012. But not much has changed in the research I've done about this. Some of the numbers have changed some, but not that much. So let's go through what this chart says. First of all, it says that most of the data we collect, 70% of it, is about customers. And that's great. Of that 70%, 80% of it is stored. Then we hit this big divide, this big gulf, right? Because of that 80% that's stored, only 3% is prepared for analysis. That's amazing. What a small number. Of that 3%, 0.5% is being analyzed. And then from there, less than 0.5% is being operationalized. So you can see there's a lot of work yet to be done on taking data and making it useful. So this is like good news, bad news. Good news is we're collecting lots of good data and we're storing it. The bad news is we're not doing much with it at all. And we are not mining it for insights. Now, I said that 70% of all data being collected is around customers. That's good. There are 3 other buckets that we could collect data around and that we do collect data around. This is just not that much. One is product data, and that can, take the form of hard numbers. It also takes the form of ethnographic data, where you're looking at how customers are actually using or interfacing with your product or service. There's financial data, which is what are people doing and the results that they're generating that rolls up into financial data. And then there's internal process and operational data, which is what are people doing, how are they working, right, internally in your company. Now, I'm making a point here that customer data, product data, financial data, and internal process and operational data all is connected to people and how people are working and operating and interfacing with you and your company. I think it's so easy to think of data. Well, data is an abstraction, right? So when we're looking at numbers, charts, graphs, these are abstractions. And one of the things that we have to remember is that there are real people involved and embedded in all of the data. And when we start losing sight of the people, then maybe our decision making isn't as sharp as it could be. So anyway, these are the basic 4 data buckets that we have to collect data around, or data in. But let's look at sort of where we are today with data storytelling. I see this all the time. When you do Google searches on data storytelling, the bulk of what you'll get is data visualization information. There are whole books called Data Storytelling, and it's all about how to visualize the data. So here's a typical data viz, as I call it, data visualization, data viz chart. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, and you can put your answer in the chat box, is first of all, is there an insight that you can get from looking at this chart? Yes, no. If you have an insight, what is it? So go ahead and put something in the chat box. And let's see. Yeah. When I was doing Bob, great. Insights are not data points, factoids, etc. That's exactly right. And yet this is sort of what we have in this chart, right, Bob? And when I led a workshop last week on data storytelling, I asked the same question of everybody in the room. And they said, no, we really can't find an insight, right? There really aren't any insights here. And so the next question is, well, is there any business value that you can gain from this chart? And again, when we asked that question in the workshop, everybody just kind of threw down their pens and said, no, absolutely not. And yet, when you go look at data visualizations, this is the bulk of what you will find, charts like this, right? And so these charts or these data visualizations, they're really sometimes difficult to find an insight around. Sometimes it takes a lot of work. Like I, as looking at a chart, would have to spend a lot of time kind of looking at it and figuring it out. The insight isn't readily apparent if there is one there. And it's questionable about whether a business value is actually embedded somewhere in the chart. Yeah, and again, Bob, right, information is nice to know, but we haven't interpreted what it means and what relevant it has to our situation, and that's exactly right. So this is part of that chasm that we experience with the data. So let's talk about what an insight is for a minute. Now, what an insight is, well, what it's not, let's do that first. It's not data. It's not a data point. It's not an opinion, and it's not a customer wish or a leader's wish, right? So basically, an insight boils down to three things. Is it a new way of viewing the world that causes us to re-examine or challenge the status quo? That's one kind of an insight. Another kind of an insight is, it's a penetrating realization about human behavior that results in sort of like a fresh perspective. And then a third kind of an insight is, it's a discovery about the underlying motivations that drive people to actions. So we can find a new opportunity, or a new market, a new product, service, right? And then, of course, insights are great, but then are they actionable? And we need to look at our data and start teasing out not only insights, but actually actionable insights so that we can take, or so that a proper course of action, so action steps are suggested, and we can then make better decisions. So to back up even further, because we're getting into the land of the questions. Every story starts with a question. That question is, what happened? Right? Every data story starts with a question. And that question usually is, what's the problem? So that starts getting at business value questions. So what are some business value questions that we could be asking before we even make a data request? Or if we have data, we start asking business value questions so we can start articulating the importance or the purpose or what we can gain from the data. So the first one is, okay, what's the problem, right? What's the business question that you're trying to solve? That comes first. And some of those subsets of questions are, well, how can we increase revenue? How can we reduce costs? How can we increase efficiency? And even more importantly, how does this impact people? Either our staff or our customers or vendors. How does this impact our mission? How does this impact our values? And then the second question that a lot of people forget is, and how much pain exists around this question today? Because we know that if there's not, pain that's associated with a particular problem, the likelihood of getting any traction on it is less, right? So these are some of the business value questions we need to start asking at first. So then where do we go? Well, here's the model that I've been putting together for a while now and testing out. Now, the model basically is taking the knowledge continuum model. Now, this is a model that's been around since the 1970s or so, and it's really all about, okay, how does data get transformed through various levels into wisdom? Now, we're not going to go through this chart in fine detail. You'll have the recording afterwards. You can study this chart to your heart's content later on. What I really want to point out are three things. The first one is that, this is how data moves, right? From data to information, where you're cleaning and manipulating it, to actually looking at patterns and analyzing it and gaining knowledge. Now, the experience of when you're at the level of knowledge is, that's interesting. Yeah, I get it. So you're making sense. The data makes sense. It's a sense-making activity. Yeah, that's interesting. I get it. Okay, I understand. Now, to get to the next level, you have to jump up, right? And when you get to that level, then your experience of the data goes something like this. Oh, okay, now I know what's needed to make the way we do things today a little bit better. So it's taking familiar action. So it'd be, now I have an understanding of how we can reduce cycle times about X, right? We make this one change, right? So it's familiar action. It can be small actions, it can be larger actions, but it's really all dealing with the familiar. Oh, now I know what I can do around how we're working today to make some improvements. Then the next level you jump up to is the wisdom level. I'm still working on that word, wisdom. I don't know that that's the right word, but that's what we've got today. And when you get to that wisdom level, now you have the experience, oh gosh, of course, I see a new way of doing things. I see a new product or service we could put together, or I see a new opportunity, I see a new market open for us, or I see a whole way we can disrupt the market. Right? Fundamentally changing the way we do things. So that, when you get up to the wisdom level, is all about meaning making. Oh, that's what it means. Knowledge is about sense making. Oh, I get it. Move up to understanding, get to wisdom. Now that's what it really means. So the first point is, okay, this is how data moves from data up to wisdom. The second point is removing some sense making to meaning making. And the third thing to take away from this is that there are a series of questions you ask at the knowledge level to jump up to understanding, and at the understanding level to jump up to wisdom. So we're right back to asking great questions, sort of like this panel back here in the background. It's all about the art of the question and knowing those questions. So Lori and I have figured out a whole bunch of questions to ask in workshops. We'll give those questions to people and we'll ask them, okay, put them in the right category, like knowledge, understanding, wisdom. And they always put them, most of them, of the questions are all in the wrong place. So that tells us something too, that there's a lot to be gained in really paying attention to the art of the question and understanding more deeply each of these knowledge, understanding, and wisdom levels and how to get there. So the workshop that we do moves everybody through all of those three levels so that they can start articulating their insights. And you get three levels of insights: knowledge insights, understanding insights, and wisdom insights. But where do you think most people are playing today? Most companies, most people in the data visualization world. Where do you think? And if you guess at the knowledge level, you'd be pretty right. Now, there are companies that are working at the understanding at the wisdom levels, no question, right? That's how we get business breakthroughs, and that's how we get process improvements and what have you. But if you look at the broad landscape, you can see that most people are still playing at the level of knowledge. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that makes sense, right? So kind of dig into this chart on your own when you get the link to this webinar afterwards. Let's keep going to the next slide. So once you have your insights, then you can start telling the data story. No insights, no story, right? It's really hard to figure out the story you're supposed to tell when you don't have any insights. Now, there are a couple things that I see going on in the world today and that I experience. So I see people in the analyst world and the data world going, okay, we've got to tell the data story, and not getting to the insights, right? So they're kind of at a loss for how to tell the data story, and they're also not realizing that the data story is actually an experience that you're delivering. So when you go back to that chart that we showed, that data visualization early on in the webinar, how different would it have been if the author had asked first, what's the experience I want to give people who are viewing this chart? What's the experience I want them to have? So the other thing I hear is occasionally from my own colleagues out there in the world, I don't hear this often, but once in a while I do, is them saying, oh, right, just figure out the story that you want to tell and then find the data points that support that story. And I go, oh my gosh, I mean, that's, you know, data folks and scientists would throw us out of the room really fast, you know, if we kept giving that kind of advice, because of course you want the data to inform the story. So let's say you have your insights, and then what do? Now you have to start crafting the data story. Now, there are a number of different kinds of stories you can tell once you have the insights. You can tell the gathering story about how you gathered together the data, or the discovery story and what you discovered. Maybe the Kaizen story, Kaizen meaning you know, the story of figuring out those small improvements that you can make. Or there's the breakout story. Oh yeah, here's a story of how we can break out of the old and into the new. But I'm sharing with you the influence story, because once you have your insights, and now you want people to, you want to be able to tell the story of those insights, and then you want to influence them to take action. So I thought, oh yeah, the influence story is probably the most valuable that I could share with you. So this is a simple structure for how to put together the influence story, right? You get together with your characters, right? Who are the people involved? And it's so easy in the data story to forget the people, right? It ends up being all about data points, but no, we need people, right? Because this is a story, all stories have people and characters. So make sure you bring those in and that you figure out who those are. There's also a setting and a context, right? How did all of this get started? What was the inciting incident? What was the question people had, right, that got you started in digging into the data? What was the problem that was presented, right? What problem are you trying to solve? What answer are you trying to gain from the data? And then what actions did you take to figure out how to solve that problem, to answer the question? What were the results you experienced? And from those results, oh, right, suggested action steps pop up. Those are your proposals, right? Your recommendations. Here are the benefits if you take action, and then your key message and close at the end. So that's a pretty basic story, but that's the influence story, and that I think is really, really beneficial and powerful for people to know how to craft. So we could stop there, but what I want to do is kind of go back kind of into the bigger picture, step back a little, and start talking about the two other pieces of that experience economy equation. We've talked about data, we've talked a little bit about story. There's a lot more to say about story regarding that, but this is what we've done so far today. And let's talk a little bit about personas and a little bit about journey maps, so you have the full picture. So first of all, I want to thank Sean Van Tine, who's a colleague and friend of mine. He's the author of the Customer Experience Revolution. And when we were putting together our talk last week on data storytelling and customer experience design, he put together this section on personas and journey maps. And so thank you, Sean, for letting me use this material today. And that's the hyperlink to his book if you want to check it out. So what's a persona, right? Well, a persona is an image. It's a little description of a unique group of people. It's one of your target markets, and they all share common goals, right? They share common goals, and it's all about who they are, what they do, and what they think. Now, these are fictional. These are more like archetypes, and it's based on their behaviors and attitudes. Now, there are lots of tools on the web to help you create personas, right? So we don't need to go into that today. Just do some Google searches and you'll find all that's available out there. And I've created personas for my target markets, and I find them enormously valuable. And why do I find them valuable? Because it gives a real common language for all of us to talk meaningfully about our customers. Now think about the data folks in a company, the software engineers, the marketing people. The personas give everybody a common language to talk about customers. So this is one way we don't lose sight of people that are behind the numbers or embedded in the numbers. And it builds a lot of empathy towards customers, which is really great, because maybe I'll do a whole webinar sometime on empathy and the power of empathy to generate profits. But anyway, we'll leave it at that right now, that personas build empathy towards customers, and that drives business productivity and business results and business profits. So let's take a quick dive into journey maps. So a journey map basically tells the story of your customer's experience from beginning to end. It's a map of how they feel, what their needs are, and their pain points. I've done journey maps for my own business, and they're so enlightening and so illuminating. I've learned so much doing that. What are some benefits of doing these journey maps? Well, you get to identify where your experience degrades for your customer. In other words, it's a danger point where they end up leaving, right? You get to identify where you delight them. In other words, this is why they stay. And so often when you do these journey maps, you'll discover, oh, this is a place that we delight customers. We didn't even realize that. Now imagine if you had a data point and you didn't realize that there was a place of delight, and you made a decision off of a set of data, and you undermined this accidentally, right? So doing journey maps is really great because it helps provide some more context for the data that you're putting together and analyzing. And then journey maps also identify new opportunities for you where you can grow, right? So they're very, very helpful. Together, the system is called, Sean and I, when we were doing the talk, we were saying, okay, so what do we want to name this that we've put together? And this is what we've called it. It's really the data experience. And I like that because it, again, reminds us that what we want to do with the data is deliver an experience. We want to tell the story, which is an experience, and personas and journey maps help us articulate the experience that we're going for in our business, so that our data and all of these bits and pieces can work really well together as a complete system. All right, So we have maybe a couple minutes for any questions that people might have. So if there's a question, if there's something you want to put in the chat box, I'll wait a little bit and see what pops through. And while we're waiting, see if anybody has any questions. I'll do a quick wrap up. So I really want to thank people for being here and participating today, hanging out with me. I hope you gained some valuable information, some new ways to think about data storytelling. Got some ideas about things that you can do. If you're not part of my newsletter, go ahead and hop on the website to juststoryit.com and sign up for it. If you're curious about more about how to bring data storytelling into your company for more business value, then yeah, send me a note, an email on the website. We'll set up a 15-minute call. And then also, you'll be getting a recording of this after it's rendered. So you'll get a link to it. And Bob, I'm going to answer your question. And Tom, I'm going to answer your question too. So let me finish the sentence. So you get the recording. I'm also going to send you a little free tool to help you with your data storytelling. So great. All right, let's answer these questions. These are both great. So what's more impactful? Starting with your audience's priorities or their problems? Well, Bob, I think it's problems first, and because those most likely are going to be their priorities. And sometimes people will approach us and say, hey, my priority is this. And then you have to start asking them, well, what's the real problem that's driving these priorities, right? So if you can help articulate the problem first, then you have a better chance of connecting with them with an appropriate story that's meaningful for them, that helps drive the relationship and the next part of the discussion. So I hope that helps. And Thomas asked, how many companies use data storytelling? Oh, that's a great question, Thomas. And there are actually 10 industries that are deeply involved with data, big data, and working to articulate insights from the data. Everything from energy sectors, education sectors, healthcare sectors. And if you want, you can send me an email and I'll send you a link to the article that talks about all of those industries and what's going on there. So, and yeah, I'm glad you agree with my answer, Bob. If you solve their problems, they usually have more interest in taking action. Okay, great. Love it. All right. So, hey, guys, let's continue the conversation offline. Give me a call, send me an email. You'll be hearing from me again. I really appreciate your time and attention today. And let's go have more fun telling data stories. And I'll see you around the business storytelling neighborhood. All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye now.